Good morning, Mount Olive Church. This is your Wednesday morning devotion, and it's time for breakfast. So I brought with me my breakfast material, which is a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Isn't that a good breakfast? Most people like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so I guess I'll wait and eat that in just a minute. The topic for today in loving others who disagree with you is empathy. Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Henry Ford once said, if there's one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from his angle as well as your own. Again, Henry Ford said, the secret of success lies in one's ability to get the other person's point of view, to see things from his angle as well as your own. That's a secret to success and leadership. And then we see another quote, an old proverb among salesmen that says, if you would sell John Smith what John Smith buys, you must see John Smith through John Smith's eyes. So a good salesman would live by this proverb, a good salesman. If you would sell John Smith what John Smith buys, you must see John Smith through John Smith's eyes. And that's kind of what we're talking about, empathy. Um, I remember a story about sending Hannah. This may not be exactly true, it may be a story. I'm going to include Hannah's name in it, but sending Hannah across the road on an errand to go to my grandmother's to get some sugar and some flour. It took Hannah forever to make that trip and run that errand. When she gets back, of course, I'm, you know, having a little discussion with her about why it takes her so long to do things and, why it took her so long to go over and just get some sugar and flour. And she said that her playmate, Abby, across the road, had fallen down and broken her doll. And so she had to take the time to help her. Well, I began to wonder how she could help Abby fix her doll. How could she repair her doll at such a young age? And so I asked her, what did you do to help her with her broken doll? Hannah made a nervous reply. I just sat down and helped her cry. I just sat down and helped her cry. See, those are illustrations of empathy. And I heard it put like this one time. That's why I had the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Uh, if you see somebody fall in a pit and they're there in that pit, sympathy says, boy, I feel sorry for them that they're in that pit, and walks away. Compassion may go and get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and say, here, until you can be rescued, here's something to ease your sorrow. Here's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to eat. But empathy is the next degree, the next level. Empathy is helping her cry. Empathy is getting in the pit with them and giving them a peanut butter jelly sandwich and you eating one at the same time with them. As Henry Ford said, seeing somebody else's point of view. As the old proverb said, looking through John Smith's eyes. As Hannah said, I just sat down and helped her cry. Getting in the pit and eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich just to see what it is they're going through. These are illustrations of empathy. Now let's look in the Bible and see how that Jesus illustrated empathy for us. How did Jesus illustrate empathy for us? We're going to John chapter 8. And here is the first verses in verse 3. So Jesus is sitting down in the temples, right? And he's teaching. And so all of a sudden, or the synagogues, all of a sudden, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the religious police, they brought a woman who was taken in adultery. In the act of adultery, they found her. And when they had set her in the midst, they came for an argument. And that's what we're talking about, loving those who disagree. And they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. And Moses in the law commands us that she should be stoned. What sayest thou? Pretty self-explanatory. They want an argument with Jesus. They go and catch this known lady. She's known in the town. And they catch her in the act of adultery. And they bring her before Jesus and throw her on the ground at his feet and say, now Moses in the law says for us to stone her and kill her right now. But what say you? And look at verse 6. They said this, tempting him, wanting to argue with him, that they could accuse him. Now, how could they accuse him? Well, if Jesus said that the woman was not worthy of death, then he's going against the Mosaic law, and therefore he's not to be trusted as the Messiah, against their own Jewish Mosaic law. But if Jesus says, let's kill her, then they can accuse him by the Roman law, which did not include a death penalty for those who were taken in the act of adultery. They were under the Romans, so he would violate the Roman law if they did stone her under his command as a rabbi. But then they also had their own Jewish law. So they really had him in a catch-22, I guess you'd say. And so they're wanting to argue. Now, how does Jesus respond? Remember, empathy. Take the time. When you get into an argument, take the time to see through the other person's eyes. Take the time to walk in their shoes. Take the time to see why it is they're feeling the way they are. So Jesus stooped down, and with his finger he wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. See, he's listening to them and he's writing at the same time. A good skill that I need to do better, and we all could do better, is when it comes to confrontation and argument, stop and let the other person, let them tell their side of it without interruption. So Jesus is there writing on the ground. Now, we don't know what he's writing. Some think he's writing names. Some thinks that he's writing specific sins or just a list of sins. We don't really know what he's writing. So when they continued asking him, so he's listening to them, he lifted up himself and said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast the stone at her. In other words, put yourself in her position. Have you ever sinned? Have you ever broken the law? If you've broken the law, do you not deserve to be stoned, even though it may not be adultery? So whoever's not sinned, you got the right to cast the first stone. So Jesus responded in this argument by drawing them into a place of empathy, to where they could put themselves where this lady was, because they had all sinned. How do we know? Well, Jesus, verse 8, stooped down and began writing on the ground again. And when they had heard this saying, they were convicted by their own conscience. So they were all guilty. They all had sinned, just like us, for all had sinned and come short of the glory of God. And they went one by one, from the eldest even to the last. And only Jesus was left alone with a woman standing in her midst. How did Jesus win this argument? He drew these religious leaders and elite into a place of empathy for the sinner, to realize that they could see through her eyes that they were sinners just the same, and they had broken the law, and that they were guilty of breaking the law, punishable by death in all points. And so when they put themselves in her position, they were convicted and they walked away. Empathy is a powerful tool when it comes to arguments. And then you say, well, how does Jesus have empathy with her? Well, the Bible's clear, isn't it? Jesus came for one reason. And that reason was 2 Corinthians 5:21. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin. Jesus got in the pit with us. Jesus started eating that peanut butter and jelly sandwich with us. Jesus, though he was sinless, he wanted to bring heaven down to us. And when he did, he came and he took on the weight, the shame, the guilt, the penalty of our sin. He walked in our shoes on the cross. That's powerful. That's how Jesus knew or showed empathy towards this sinner woman. That's how he has showed empathy for me. He didn't have to come, but he came down to this earth and he took my place on the cross so that I might be made the righteousness of God in him. Hebrews 4:5 says, for we have not a high priest, Jesus, who cannot be touched by the feelings of our infirmities, our struggles, our temptations. Jesus felt everything that we feel in this life, but he yet was tempted in all points, but yet without sin. So Jesus is the perfect example of empathy and the power of empathy to relieve the suffering and the sorrow of another by walking in their shoes, looking into their eyes the way that they would see things. And so we want to finish with this. Jesus has done that for you. And if you're here this morning and you're listening and you want to know Jesus in a personal relationship, you realize that he came and took your place. He died on a cross for your sins. And because of that, you want to give him your life today, then all you need to do is say, Jesus, I believe you died for me. Jesus, I believe you rose from the grave. Forgive me of my sins, and I surrender my life to you. And here's what he says to her as she comes and she meets him. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw no one but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Number one, he told her to go. He gives her a second chance. God, through Christ, gives each and every one of us a second chance on life. Would you surrender your life to him today? In fact, each and every day is a new beginning, a second chance with God. You may have royally messed up yesterday with your friends and your family, but this morning you have an opportunity to have a second chance. Go, he says. And secondly, he says, I forgive thee. I don't condemn thee. There is forgiveness in coming to Christ. And lastly, he gives the warning and the instruction. Once you meet Christ, go and strive to sin no more. You don't want that sin anymore in your life. You may mess up, but you don't want that sin anymore in your life, and you want Jesus to change your life. We hope today that you've gained something. Empathy is powerful in loving others who disagree with us. Have a beautiful